kind of, you know, sort of like a mood board. It was just an outline. It doesn't even have to be a full-on mood board. It was just an outline of what your product, your idea was going to be. So with that, now I didn't receive any, but maybe you overlooked that. I know you guys are busy, but you know, I'm not going to be not enforce anything in that regard. But we definitely want to make sure that we're paying attention to milestone 2. And what this essentially will be is kind of like a draft of your ad. Since we didn't really get any milestone 1s. So the week that we're back, this would be the end of the day, the week we're back. Because remember, you can always ask questions. I'm going to put a little comment here so we can see it. So that week, milestone 2 is the document setup. So remember that tutorial is there. So document setup and follow the tutorial for setup directions. Some of you may already know how to do this. It's pretty straightforward, but that's okay. I wanted to give you a good tutorial so that you can just follow along and you have your actual document. It's only maybe less than 10 minutes, I think. And then on that same milestone, you're going to do the, we'll say basically a draft or rough layout of your ad. Now remember, your ad, the ad includes so this is noted up above. Really make sure that you read these. The ad includes your product, so the product that you choose, worked into an image composite. So I gotta slow down my typing there. Composite. Okay, so remember, that's going to be class 8. That is due. These get handed in. They get submitted to, and I'll even put this submitted. I really got to slow down. Submitted to the assignment Dropbox. So you're going to submit your milestone 2 to the assignment. It can be a PDF. That's fine. And you're also going to submit the final there on the next week. That'll be week 9, which is noted down below here. Okay, so don't worry, it will take unlimited hand-ins. You won't overwrite anything. I wish this would stop moving. It won't overwrite anything, and you can submit unlimited. So you're going to submit milestone 2 to the Dropbox, and then the final ad you'll submit to the Dropbox. Remember, if you have any questions before submitting, just hang on and ask during class. You can completely ask if there was something you're unsure of. Just ask. It's due, you know, at the end of the day anyway. And then I can help you through anything. So even if you're not sure about document setup, if you're not sure about where to submit it, whatever that may be, just ask me. And then, so remember last week, was it last week? I think it was last week you submitted your Photoshop composites. So that was the skill builder too. So remember, you want to be doing these skill builders. They're the satisfactory or unsatisfactory. There's several that haven't been submitted. So if you haven't submitted it, make sure you do that. I'll still accept it, but that would be 5% lost. Okay, so make sure you get that in. If you can get that in really over the weekend, because I'll be grading next week. So you want to make sure that those are in for your midterm marks. So please really be on top of checking the briefs, noting when things are due. You know, each project does come with milestones. So we know that when the final is due, and that is the formal due date on Blackboard, but you want to make sure that you're seeing when these things are due. Everyone missed this one, so I'm okay with that. That's fine. But please make sure you get this second milestone, okay? So make a note about that, and then you know, take a screenshot or go back on the recording, whatever you have to do to make sure that you're aware of what that's going to be. But basically, it's just a rough draft. Most of the students, they get pretty close to their final on that one. And it's just for me to make sure that your project is moving along. That's all. During class, though, always remember, you can share things. We can share your screen. You can show us what you're working on. You know, I welcome that. Okay, so please read through that carefully. If you haven't yet, you definitely want to read through it. All the details you need are there. Where you get your resource files. If you need you're gonna need to work with pictures. So here's where you can get your pictures. And remember, it is a Photoshop composite. Now I'm going to show you a couple of things in InDesign today. Now I'm just going to get this switched back here so I can see your question. Do we need to submit that milestone 1 now? If you have that, and you can submit it. It was due last week, but you can still submit it. But no, I'm gonna waive that now. I didn't receive any, and I'll let you forego the milestone 1. But please do focus on the second one. Okay, so really working through that. All right. So I'm going to show you a couple of things in InDesign today. Remember, you're going to be working through those that tutorial, that intro tutorial, and that is going to be. Let me get InDesign shared here. Always switching it up. Oh, I guess I could have just stayed there. So that'll be this. You're going to be going through. So this is what we do just as a tutorial. It's going to walk you through a lot of details about InDesign. And one of the things that it does, I'm going to explain this, is it asks you to place the reference file. So that reference file is actually, I'll see if I can maybe get it to show here. There we go. So the reference file that you'll place will look like this. It's a PNG, and you're going to notice that you don't have very much room when you add, especially on the laptop. You won't have a whole lot of room to place it in, but you'll see in the tutorial. Let me get this so I can see you guys. Always moving things around on here. I want to see if you have any questions in the chat. So let me do a little bit of organization here. There we go. So you'll see in the tutorial, I place in a PDF, and then I have to put a white background behind this. This is the reference image that you'll be recreating. You can, don't worry about it. Just place in the PNG that I gave you, the finished sample, because it will have the white background. It'll actually make it easier for you. And then you'll scale that down. And I'm going to talk about scaling. I'm going to do a fair bit of InDesign today to get you guys acquainted with it. Remember, these are recorded, so you can go back and you can watch. If there's something I mentioned or something I did, just come back, fast forward the recording, and you'll find it. So you place that in. But the thing is, on the laptops, you know, even mine's a desktop, and I have a fair bit of room, but not a whole lot. On the laptops, you're going to have a little less space here. So what you can do, if you want to work on this and have that, you know, totally visible, you can go to your layout, and instead of doing an 8.5 by 11, and you don't have to submit this, so you can set it up any way you want to, as long as you're able to go through it. Instead of an 8.5 by 11, you can do like a tabloid, which is a 17 by 11. And I'll just switch it there. So then when you do that, you'll be able to have enough space to bring your reference image onto the page with it. It'll just give you a little bit more room to work. So that's one of the workarounds that you can get, because I know the laptop screens are quite small. And sometimes on your laptops with InDesign, you don't always see everything that's up here. So there's a little menu there that will take you to the things that you're not seeing. You'll be able to find things through that as well. Okay, so and I'll see, I'm going to talk more about this, but I'll mention what's going on up there and how to get that and everything. Okay, so this is for that tutorial. You're recreating this, and like I said, I walk you through really every detail. But InDesign is one of those programs where we've got to pay pretty close attention just really to the details. I'm just going to get this back to the way I had it there. And when I say the details, little things, for example, when we put something in to InDesign, when we draw a box for, in this example is just a box, a blue box. But when you first draw a box, sometimes it's going to have what looks like a black outline on it. And you may not really notice that because you may have drawn the box while your color tools are already at a certain setting. I'm just going to press the W key here. This is, right now we're in working mode. So I'm going to go to presentation mode just by pressing W. So we can see that black outline on there. That's not very nice. Little things like that we want to catch. Now the way I fix that, I'll go back to working mode here. We should always work in working mode, even though it looks there's a lot going on. We should always work in that. I'll go back to this, and up here I'll be able to change that to none. The none with the red line through it indicates no effect. So in this case, it's no stroke. We can see it. I'll click it. And this is called the stroke or outline, but it's referred to as stroke. And then this one is the fill. So when you go through the tutorial, there will be a lot of detail, but that detail really is everything that I walk you through in the playlist is, it's quite, although it's detailed, it really is what we typically use in InDesign for our kind of work. So even though it's one sort of article, a single page article, we cover a lot. We really cover a lot of what you would work with. I show you things like span and so on. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment anyway. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit. But what I want to give you a little bit of an intro to InDesign, a little more formal intro. Now I also have open my demo ad here. This is an ad that I think we looked at this when I released the project. I can't quite remember the project 2, but this is an ad setup that I have. Now you're doing an ad that is also this size. And one thing I want you to pay attention to, I'm just going to go to Acrobat for a moment here, is in this setup, in this document setup, if you downloaded this prior to our last class, you want to make sure that you have the updated version that has these document settings in it. And one of those is talking about the live area. So I talk about the live area in the setup tutorial as well and what that means, okay? So just make sure that you have the correct brief that you've downloaded, so you have the exact sizes to set. And then when you watch the document setup tutorial, I address that. I address what live area is and so on. So the first thing, when you get into InDesign, got a lot of work going on here, so I just have some files that I can't close because they take a while to get opened again. So when you're starting in InDesign, the first thing you want to do is go to Essentials Classic. So up here, you'll see it'll probably say Essentials when you first open it. Essentials Classic is the best working mode. I should say even the best learning mode. I still use it. That's the one that I typically use, is Essentials Classic. And the reason I do that is because when I click on something, all of the information comes up in this top ribbon. You know, we get the properties of what I clicked on. If I go into type, I get the type settings for the character. So that's the character settings. And then I get the paragraph settings, which as you get to know the program and as you work with it, this will all make sense what these are. And we'll use a fair bit of them even just in this example. So you get things right at the top there. Even when I click on that box, you can see that it's just a box, but there's a lot about that box that it wants to tell us. And the great part about that is, as you learn this, you want to have easy access to things like the color. So that's the stroke, that's the fill. Remember, stroke is the outline. The fill is, of course, the full color of it. So this is the best working mode. Once you set it, if you're on your own computer, which all of you are, it should stay like that. Another thing that happens in Illustrator, in InDesign, is the quality, the viewing quality. So right now we can see this one, it's quite fuzzy. And it's because at the moment, I don't have the link for that. So I'm going to open up the links panel. And I should explain what I mean by I don't have the link. What InDesign does is when we place an image, so you'll see in the tutorial, we go to File and Place. We go File and Place, or Command D, and that allows us to place an image. We're placing an image in, and I'll talk about images in a moment. When we place an image in, it's not actually embedding that image into the file. What it's doing is linking to the image. So when you place it, it knows where the image is stored, and it actually just shows the image, but it doesn't embed it in the file, because InDesign is for multi-page documents, typically like magazines, books. So if we had a file that's quite large with a lot of images and they were all embedded in the file, then that file would be quite big. It would be a really large file. So we want to make sure that we know where those files are. So in this case, in my links panel, there was one indicator. First of all, it's fuzzy. This is the reference PNG. And here it says PDF, of course. But the other thing was, if I can get to it there, that little question mark there, that's indicating this question mark. Something's missing. So what I would do is click on that. I would go to the flyout menu and relink. I'm not going to do that now because I know that this file is actually kind of missing. I have to find it. But you have the PNG for that one anyway. However, whenever you notice that images or something's not showing right, the first thing you want to check is make sure you don't have any warnings. And you can see we have 3 spots right now where we have warnings. We've got the question mark here in the links panel because I have that open. We have the question mark over at the image here. And we have down at the bottom, we have error. I'm going to talk about that as well. So that's something you want to keep an eye on. So I would go to relink and I would locate it. It would basically ask me just to track it down on my computer. And then I would click relink and it would get rid of that error and it would show it correctly. These, they're fine. They're all in there, and you can see it gives us little properties about the file. The resolution is right there, PPI, and so it's pretty handy. But you want to make sure if any images are missing, you have errors, that you correct that in there. So the other thing with images is that when you show them, sometimes they're going to show fuzzy. Sometimes it's just when you open it up, and if you are opening this document regularly, it should show correctly, but it also depends on the settings on your InDesign that it may actually go back to what's called quick display. So I've got this selected, and I'm going to go to View, and there's Display Performance. So right now, this is showing a typical display. I'm going to zoom in because it'll show a little better since you're seeing it from your screen and my screen. You can see there's a little bit of fuzziness there. Now what this does, when I go to high quality, it's not changing the image. We have to remember that. When you select high quality display, it's not actually doing anything to the image. All it's doing is improving its display of that image that you linked in. That's all it's doing. The reason that we have typical display is because typical allows it to move faster, allows the file to move faster. It's not bringing in as much visual data as it would with high quality. So we're able to move what may be a larger file quicker. I'm going to choose high quality. I don't know if you'll see it change screen to screen, but we'll see. I'll see it here. So when I choose high quality, we'll see the quality improve. You could see a little blip there and it really cleaned up a lot. And I'll go back again just so you can see the difference. Typical display and then high quality. So when you're doing a single page thing like this, it's great to work in high quality, but there's one difference there. I went to view, the view menu, and I chose high quality. But if I wanted to do that just for a single image, if I had a lot of images and I didn't want a high quality all of them, I just wanted to do the one I'm working on, I could actually go to the object menu. So I'll click on the image, and I'm using my main cursor, and we've seen this in Illustrator. We have the main cursor and the direct select. So I have my main cursor, I click on the image, I'll go to object. Now this is pertaining to that object only, and I'll go down to display performance, and I can choose high quality. So if I do that, I can turn off the display performance high quality for the view. So I'll set it to typical. And then I'm just going to go back again, make sure this is still in high. So I've made just that object show in high quality. Now that's not too important in the document like this, but when you have a longer document where you're doing multi-page, like a magazine or something, and maybe your computer's running a little slow, that will help. That will help to just specify that you want high quality on a single image. So another thing about working with images we'll talk about shortly, but I just want to go over a couple of other things with navigation. Okay, so first, and I talk about this in the intro, but I want to clarify a couple things. So I'm just going to close this links panel. I'll actually tuck it in there. Did I tuck it in there? Oh, okay, here we go. There it goes. Okay. So navigating these programs, that's important. We talked about that with Illustrator, talk about with Photoshop, trusting that you watched the tutorials for those. So with InDesign, navigation is very important as well, but almost a little bit more so because you're working with multi-pages. Now, right now, I don't have a lot of pages in this. I'm just going to add some pages. I'm just adding a number of pages just so that we can see the difference. When you're working with multiple pages and you're doing kind of structural, more detailed work, the InDesign is a little more technical, but you can still, of course, be very creative with it. You want to be able to navigate your document. And navigation, again, comes back to what we were doing in Illustrator and Photoshop. So the first thing being that you want to move things around in a fluid way. Remember, these programs, they try to control us. They can be very rigid, and they almost dictate how we are going to work if we don't know the way to work with them quite fluidly. So one of those things is holding your space bar down. And this is a default setting in InDesign and Illustrator and Photoshop. Hold your spacebar down, click and drag, and you get to move things around. So if I'm zoomed in, holding space, and I can click and drag and move things around like that. That's a lot easier than, in my case, I would have to uncover my scroll bars here and use this one. So you can see that's a very rigid way to work. We want to work very fluidly. Another aspect of working that way is how we zoom in and out. So to zoom in, of course, we have the magnifying glass. I never, ever use that. And we have Command or Control plus and minus. So if I do plus or minus, all it's doing is from the center of the screen. If I have something selected and I do plus, it'll zoom in on that selected item. But I like to use the keyboard. And this is something that with our programs, we've talked about this with the other programs, you really do want to get used to using your keyboard and your mouse for navigation. That's not only going to make things more fluid for working and more efficient, but it's also going to it's going to make you look a little more professional with the program. So it has its working advantages primarily, but if you are working with others, you want to show that you know how to control the program. So working with the keyboard, I do in this order. I do Space Command, and then I can zoom in, click or drag. Space Command Option, I can zoom out. And so if you're on a PC, that would be Space Control or Space Control Alt. So Space Control to zoom in, Space Control Alt to zoom out. So you can see as I get working with this, I work with this program every day. So you do get used to it, of course, but I click the space bar, and then if I want to zoom in on something, Space Command, zoom out a bit, Space Command Option, move it around. And then if I want to reset my page, Command 0 will do that. Now I've got a pretty tight space right now just because I'm saving some space here on the right for the chat. But what you want to make sure you're doing is really using your space efficiently, and part of that is navigating the files efficiently. So Space Command to zoom in, Space Command Option to zoom out, and using your space bar, and then Command 0 to reset the page. Now a lot of this, of course, comes across from Photoshop and Illustrator as well. So that's a great thing. Once you get used to doing that in those, you're doing it in this. So we have navigation. Part of that navigation is remembering to work with Essentials Classic so that you get everything up around the top. And then I'm going to show you a bit with these images. So I'm actually going to copy this image. And yeah, I think that's what I'll do. I'll just copy it into a new document. So I'm just going to make a quick new document here. 8.5 by 11, that's good. I don't have to do any specific settings for this one. It opened up with a lot of pages there. It opened up with a lot of pages because yesterday I started a new project and the default page number was that I set was 500. So that's why it did that here. We don't need 500 pages. So I'm just going to paste this image in. So when you place an image in, let's pretend I did that. I went to File, Place. I find that image file on my computer and I place it in. When you do that, you're going to get a little thumbnail you'll see on the cursor, and then you click and it will come in. Sometimes that image will come in. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get rid of all these pages. That's very unnecessary. Okay, here we go. So when you place an image in, especially a high res or large image, it might come in like this. Like you may not be able to see all of it. And this is just something that happens when we bring something large in. So what you want to do, if that happens, you click place and you're like, where is it? Why is it so zoomed in? It's a high res image that got placed. It was probably large area, the image size. So what you need to do is zoom out and scale it down. And the reason you're zooming out is because you're zooming out beyond the pasteboard. This gray area here, this lighter gray, is the pasteboard, and it's over there too. And what the image is doing is it's exiting the pasteboard. So we need to scale that image down into our workable area. The thing is, And pay attention to this, because when you work with images in InDesign, it will cause a little bit of a frustration for you when you get started. But remember, you can come back to this and be calm, and I'll walk you through it when you watch the recording. So you place that image in. It comes in quite large. If it does, you need to scale it. Now we know that we hold the shift key when we scale. We go down to the corner there. Oops. Yeah, I zoomed in too far there. I was holding a key when I zoomed in, so I got to go back out. So we go down to the corner. I'm trying to get this a little more visible. Well, that's okay. I'm not going to be able to. And we know we hold shift. Well, if I hold shift in this case, what it's scaling is the frame around the image. Because when we bring an image in through InDesign, what happens is the image comes in a frame. So we actually have two objects here. And I'll show you that in a moment when I can. I can show you right now, but it's going to cause more confusion. So when we scale, we want to scale the frame and the image inside at the same time. So to do that, we hold Command Shift and then click and drag. So Shift scales it. Remember, we always want to scale. We don't want to do it. We don't want to skew it like that. We want to maintain the proper image proportions. So Command Shift and scale takes it down like that. And then I can zoom in on it again. Now, what it's doing, the command is making sure that it's both image and frame. Shift is maintaining the proportion. So when I talk about image and frame, I said that when we place an image, it comes in a frame, two objects. So if I hover over this circle, I can go in with my main cursor and I can click there and I can move everything, both the image and the circle. If I go into here where my cursor suddenly turns into a hand over this circle and I click on it, you can see this orange box here. That's actually the image that's in there. So then I can move the image and you can see it's disappearing in the frame. The frame can actually crop the image down if we want. So I'm going to adjust that. And right now, because I was working this in the other document, some of the image is hidden behind the frame. I can pull that frame up and expose all of the image, or I can go to Object and Fitting, and I can fit the frame to the content. So then I know it's exactly the same as the image. So I'll do that here. So we have an object, the image, inside the frame. That can be a little confusing when you start this because you go to scale something and you're like, what happened? Well, all I did there was scale the frame. So I'll undo that. So it's Command, then Shift, then click and drag. And I'm scaling the image in the frame. A little frustrating, understandably. When you're learning it, you're like, So remember, you have the undo, Command Z, and that'll get you back. And then if you do find that you've got it, like that or something messed up and you're just like, what's happening? One thing you can do if you find that is to remember to go to, well, first, let's say you skewed it. So I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to scale it without actually holding Shift. And when we do that, we know, of course, we've skewed the image. So that's an immediate undo, okay? Always know, you'll know right when you do it. Undo that. But then when you get it like this, if anything is off, remember that you can go to Object, Fitting, and you can fit, I have to select it, you can fit the frame to the content or the content to the frame. Meaning if you make the frame a certain size, you can fit the content to that. The safer one is frame to content. Okay, so you do that, and now we know that it's all back where it needs to be. So working with images, yeah, it can definitely be a little bit of a challenge as you learn it. But once you remember those key commands, because what you don't want to be doing is going up here. So I'm clicked on it. You don't want to have to go up here and do your scaling like that. That's totally unuseful. I mean, it works, but you're just doing increments, or you're entering a guess. You know, what do I want it at? It takes forever. This way, you're actually scaling it. You're knowing, okay, well, it's a little big, a little small. There it is. I'll move it around, get it in place. You know how it works. You want to have that fluidity to it. If you do use these up here, by default, they link. So if you change one, it will change the other proportionately. So make sure that's still linked, and it will by default. But really, really do try to stay away from that. Try to use your key commands. That Command Shift, click and drag. Okay, so you'll see I talk about that in the intro tutorial, working with images, and once you get it, you'll be good. I'm going to go back to that. Where did it go? Here we go. So another thing that you'll see is in the document setup, we talk about bleed. So we talked about this a little bit before, but remember, when anything is going to the page edge, you want it to go to the bleed guide. So when you set your document, you're going to have, I'll zoom in on this, you're going to have your bleed guide. You have your trim edge, that's the paper. In fact, I'm going to go to, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll just stay on this one. It'll be easier. Bleed guide, trim, that's your paper. That's what everything gets, printed on, so to speak. And then you have the pink here is the margin. So that pink guide is referring to the page itself. Now I've brought in guides as well. Now guides are very, very useful in all of our programs, but in InDesign it's a little different because we are doing more structured layouts. So to get the guides, actually I'll show you that, but I'm going to go back and just confirm or mention a couple things about bleed again. So to get the guides, you want to make sure your rulers are on. And to do that, you can go to View and you can go to Show Rulers. Mine's on hide right now. Or you can do Command R. And Command R, Command or Control, Command R will show your rulers. Now to use guides, they're so helpful, especially when you're doing something like a magazine layout, or anything where you have a lot of content. So when you do that, working with the guides, there's three things. So the first is you can drag it out. So you click on the ruler, right on the middle of the ruler there, and drag out a guide. And this is how you do it when you need to line it up with things that are in the page, in the content. You want to really make sure that your cursor lines up exactly. Now, when you let go, I'm just going to put a guide here. Because I lined it up and let go on the page, that guide stayed only on the page. Now, if I had lined that up and I let go, I can still line it up, but if I let go in the outside of the page, so I'll line it up here. If I let go outside, it shows also outside of the page space. Now that can be handy too, especially when you have multiple pages and you want to be lining up guides from page to page. It goes right to the edge, and then your next page, you can actually line them up. You would see that if you were doing it. You're on another page. We'll do it here. You're on that other page, and then you can see, you can get a pretty close line up there, especially on the ruler. If you look up at the ruler where I'm doing that, you'll see that it'll show where it's lining up. So that's very handy. So either on the page or off the page, you can put grids. The other way if you know exactly where you want your grids according to the ruler measurements, you can just double click. So I'll go onto this page and I'll double click at 2.5, and that'll put a guide there. That guide is automatically going to go on the paste board. So using guides, really great to do. Then remembering how to get them. Dragging out on page or off, or double clicking your ruler, and that works both ways with horizontal or vertical. You can drag down horizontally and grab your guides like that. Okay, so you have the bleed, the trim. The bleed is that red, the trim, and the margin. Now that bleed, remember anything, I'm going to paste this image back in here. Good, I had it. Anything that you want to the page edge. So let's say I want my whatever this is, my ad. I want that image to show at the page edge. I'm going to go to the W key here just to clear everything, to get that presentation. And remember, that's in view, and I don't even remember where it is in view. I think it's here it is, presentation mode. I've used that key for so many years. So when you go there, we see it without the bleed. So let's pretend this has been printed out and it's lying on a gray desk. That's how it would look. But when we go to production, we have to make sure that this actually goes to the bleed. Now I can open up the frame so it does. This one probably doesn't have enough there. So I'm going to scale it. So Command Shift, click and drag. I'll just go to the edge there, and I don't have enough there, so I'm going to scale the image by itself just a bit. And I'll click off. So when I say click off, it's just clicking the gray space, click on, and now I'm going to the bleed. So you can see this image, this is what we would call a 3-side bleed. 3 of the sides have to bleed because I want 3 of the sides to print to the page edge. And remember, bleed is just, it's going off the page a little bit so that in a print and trim process, that trim can move very slightly. So if we didn't bleed, I'm going to kind of show you what it would look like if we didn't bleed, and the trim moved. Once it's all printed, let's say the trim moved, I'll be a little extreme here. It gets printed and trimmed, we didn't bleed, we would get a little white edge. It would be even thinner than this. We get that little white edge, which we wouldn't want because we want it to be properly to the edge. So that's why we bleed. We bleed so that it has more than it needs, and it allows the trim process to kind of move if necessary. So we're scaling the image, we're bleeding images, but even this, so this box here, this is a single side bleed because it's not going all the way to those sides. It's just going to the margins in this case. So only the bottom had to bleed because only the bottom is coming to the page edge. So it goes to the page edge and we take it off the page edge there. Okay, so this is where, you know, it does, as you're learning this, there are a fair number of little technical things we have to think of, scaling properly, bleeding, all those little, you know, there's many, but you do get used to them. As long as you take your time, be mindful of the steps, you'll find that InDesign is great to work with. I'm going to go over into this demo ad for a bit. So I want to show you a couple things, and I'm going to get my image showing correctly again. So I'm going to go to View and Display Performance and High Quality, just so all of this is showing correctly. And I'll press W to get our preview mode for a moment. And when we're working with type, and you'll see in this other file, I go through a lot with type. I go through some great details, some super, like, they're really the most helpful things on how to set your justification settings, how to really do clean type work, and be patient with yourselves. InDesign takes practice and takes time to really be acquainted with all the details. So I try to give them to you as slowly as I can, but you will pick it up, especially if you use it often. So I go through quite a bit of typesetting with you here. And I think, I can't even remember now. I'm going to check. No, I don't think I did any styles in that one. That's okay. So where did this one go? So when you're working with type, we want to remember that type is, of course, we saw in our type lecture, type is really our most direct engagement with the work, with the piece. People have to read it. So on your ads, one thing I want to really encourage you to pay very close attention to is how you lay out your type according to the background that it's on. So, if I was to put this type, I'm just going to make a copy of it. And the way I'm doing this is I'm holding when I clicked on it, I click, start moving it, and then I hold Option, and it'll make a double of it. That's called cloning. So if I put my type down here, maybe I can read it because I know what it says. But we know that's not very readable. We haven't optimized the readability. You can see some words, even when we zoom in on it, some words are disappearing here. There's a lot of busyness going around. So working with InDesign, Illustrator, we of course want to be creative and have fun, but we also need to make sure first and foremost that things are readable, that they can actually be read. So I wouldn't want to put type on this busy background. I want to find a clean area to have my type. Now this is a full-sized image. This image is, it's pretty much, I've moved it up in this case, but this image is set to cover the whole 8.5 by 11. I can move that, and I can move this down, and you see that's just using the image in a different way. I'm going to put it back the way I had it just because it's a little demo I do on something else. So I have the type up there on a clearer area. However, if in your ad you don't have maybe you have a busier image, or it can be any number of reasons you can't find a great spot for some type, we can do what's called tagging. You call it tag or tab. Normally I call it tab, but I'm going to do a little example of it here. Let's say I want to put type down here. You know what? I'm going to move this anyway. I'm going to put the type down here. Now let's say I wanted the type down there. Design wise, I don't, but example wise, I do. So, there we go again. Command 0 to reset that. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my working mode here because I want to see everything. Now I can't read that type, but I need that type there. I'm going to create a tab for that. So I'm going to go to now there's a couple ways. I'm going to show you the quick way here. That's what I'm going to show you first. The quick way, but the quick way is not technically the correct way. Okay, so I'm going to show you both because you're learning. Sometimes you just want to do it the quick way. Totally understandable. I'm going to show you both because I want you all to see the correct way. So I'm going to go to my shape tool here. And this is the frame tool next to it with the little X. That's pertaining to images only. You make a frame tool to bring an image in. I never use that because an image already comes in a frame, and anything we do with the frame tool, we can do anyway with the rectangle tool or the shape tools. So if I hold that down, there's more there. So I'm just going to make a rectangle and make around this box. Because we remember from our type lecture, we know type needs air. And in this case, I'll just do a black tag. So I'll explain where I placed it in a moment. So I do that. I would do the key command to send it back, but I'm just going to go arrange, right click, and I'll send backward, and you would have to send backward probably a few times, a couple times there. Okay, so the first thing I did, I'm going to go back here. I made this tab, and I didn't just box it on the page like that. I don't want boxiness. When we can avoid that, and you'll see the difference. Right now it's just a box on the page. But when we can avoid that by bleeding, so I bled the box, I went to the bleed guide. That's why we call it a tab or a tag, because it kind of comes in from the edge. Now, yeah, it's still a box, and there's still a boxy feel to it, but it's not just a box kind of floating in the image space. Now it's a box that's actually bleeding out. And what that does for the viewer, it allows them kind of an optical in and an optical out, and it doesn't feel like the type is just confined in that box. I'm going to switch the colors here because I want this to be a little easier for all of us to see. So I'm just going to make the type black, and I'll make the box white so we can see this. Now, white in your swatches, white is termed as paper. That's a print thing. When we go to print, white knocks out to the paper it's on. So in this case, we're just pretending we're using white paper. We keep the paper swatch white. We could change it if we needed to, if we were using a different color paper stock in printing, but typically it's white. So that's why we call that paper. So I made this box, and I put it around, so I gave a little bit of airspace around that type. I went to the bleed, so now the box has some space. This is by no means a nice layout, but I'm showing you how you can do this. Now that's the quick way, but that means there's two things, a box and my type frame. But the great thing about InDesign, and something that I encourage you as you get to work with it and get to know it, the great thing about it is that we can work with type and through a small document and a large one, all in one frame usually. And we can even do the coloring in one frame. And that's important now, because most of what we do in InDesign is eventually going to go into an electronic version, like a PDF, an ebook, a tablet, e-tablet, magazine, digital magazines. So it really is important to, as you become acquainted with InDesign, and it might take some of you some time, it's important to work with it knowing that it has to behave, your document has to behave a certain way in digital environments. So in my work, I do a lot of books, novel typesetting, magazine design, annual reports, manuals, what have you. All of those I have to design as though they're going to go straight to digital. I can't do any shortcuts. This is what we would call a shortcut, what we're doing now. Now I'm going to do it the right way. So I'm going to go back to my working mode, press W there. I'm going to shift select. So I selected one, and I hold shift and select the other. Just make a copy of this. So I'm using my option key and shift. And I'm going to try and mimic this, but using the type frame. So I'm going to get rid of this box. And the first thing I'm going to do is fill the type frame. So the type inside is in black. And I'm going to go to my fill up here, and I'll choose paper. Now the thing is, we can see what's happening is the inset is, or the type is not inset from the edge. We don't have that air around the type. That's so important. Remember, one of the most important things you can ever understand about working with type in design is that type needs air. So here we've got air around the type. Here we have none. That's very tense. No one wants to read that. So I'm going to select this type frame. I just filled the type frame and with white, and I'm going to open up the type frame. I'll just take it to the bleed there. And I'll even move it. I'm going to move it exactly to where it was with the other. So I know it's the same size as this one up here, but still at the edges. And now I'm going to go to the text frame options. This is an important thing you work with this a lot in InDesign. Text frame options. And I'm being detailed, remembering this is recorded. If anyone wants to go back, definitely check it out when you're trying to do these things. But I need that air around the type. And whenever I see preview, whenever we see that, click that. Make sure you click it because it's going to show you what will happen when you press OK. And what I'm going to set in this is the inset spacing. What that means is that it's going to put that air in this type frame. So I'll just hit this, and you can see it moving on each side. And that's about right. That looks good. So it's nice and even. Even mine, when I did it before, is not very even. But this does it evenly. It insets that type away from the edge. I'll say OK. And now I have the same result, only it's in a single type frame. So if this went into an ebook or something, or a tablet as a magazine ad, whatever, it will all stay together. Where what would happen, if I put this in a magazine ad, the type would be in one spot and the box would go to another spot, unless they were somehow anchored together, which is complicated. So that's why we try to work efficiently, work in that single frame. Now, I had a student ask me the other day, they were trying to do this. So I'm gonna get rid of this, the wrong one. They were asking me, they wanted to do that. They had to do that in their ad. I've got a lot going on here. I'll move that down. But they wanted to do it from the top. When we do it from the top, obviously we see that the type in the box is like right up near the top edge. So in this case, it's going to get almost trimmed off. That's if it went to print and trim. So we can still use that inset. So I'm going to do Command B. Command B is the text frame options. So Command B, I could have just clicked it up there. And I remember you need to select the text frame that you want to view the options for. And I can turn off this link, this little link in the inset, and I can push it down using just the top inset. So I can push that down away. I can go right down to the margin into my live area there. I'll say OK. And then press W. So there we go. That's the tag coming in from the top. So you can see this boxy. That looks boxy in that space. That still a box, but it's bleeding out. It allows some flow, even though we have a lot of corners and sectioned rectangles and so on. This is giving it some flow, some actual proper flow through the space, and we're giving the type that air it needs. So even if we had like, you know, a headline here that looked a little different than the rest and a little bigger, that's fine. We can still work that all in the same type frame. We can increase the size of the type frame and adjust that as we need to. So that's how we really try to work with type very carefully in this. You know, you'll see how to set your justification. Remember, when you click on an object with your main cursor, this is the frame that I've clicked on. So I get the properties of the frame up top. If I double click into the type, then I get the character and paragraph settings for the type. One thing that you'll see me discuss in this as well is, I keep doing that. One thing you'll see me discuss is space after. So where actually, I'm going to go into my working mode here. And I'm going to show here the hidden characters. So watch what happens to my text when I do this. We see all these things in here, all these, even the space has a period there. This is the symbol indicating the end of a paragraph. And this is an incorrect way to move type. So what was done here, and purposefully, of course, for the demo, was that return was done to make that space. But what happens is when we go into an HTML environment, which, you know, like an ebook, it runs off XHTML. When we go into that environment, it negates that, and it would just put this all together anyway. So what we do with InDesign when we're working with it correctly is we kind of code in our spatial areas. That's what we were doing here. When we did this correctly, we coded in that space by using the tools. When this goes into an electric environment, like an online environment, digital environment, it will maintain this space because that space is kind of coded in. It recognizes the code that happened to make that work. Where when it was a frame over a box, that wasn't coded in, and they would just part ways when they got into the digital. So here, we want to make that paragraph space, but we're going to do it in a way that will code it in. So I'm going to show one more time. This is the wrong way, and we see that character there. And I'm just going to put a black box behind this so that we can see it more clearly without that background there. Okay, so we can see all those characters. I'll turn off my working mode just for a clearer view. I won't because I want to see those. Okay, there we go. So we're going to get rid of that. And I'm going to just get my cursor live in that paragraph. This indicates the end of the paragraph. So I'm going to get my cursor live in there. And I'm going to go, and it can be anywhere because it knows we're working on that paragraph just by having your cursor live in it. And I'm going to go up to my paragraph settings up in the top corner here. And I'm going to work with what's called space after. Now, I don't know if when I zoom in like this, if you guys see that, but that little box on the bottom side there means space after. And what that'll do is code in a little bit of space after that paragraph. So I'll hit that a couple times. So that's 1/8 of an inch. So it put that space in. I didn't return. So that space, we can see there's no hidden character there now. That space is actually literally coded into the text frame, into this text frame here. So now when this goes into a digital environment, electronic magazine, whatever, ebook, it would have that space, where before it would just say, oh, that's a return, I'm going to get rid of it. And it would close up that space. So these are, you'll see these in the tutorial, little things to pay attention to, get to know. It's not, working with InDesign is not something that you can rush. But I promise you, you don't have to be a technically minded person to work with it. You just have to pay attention. That's all. So I'm going to go back to this one and show you one final thing before we wrap up. And then I'll take any questions that you may have. So actually, I'm going to show you two things. But one I explain quite in depth in the tutorial anyway. So the first thing is that this is what we call a type wrap. So you can see this content. I'm just going to get this to show. Actually, it's probably already. There we go. So this has been brought into the content. This is what we call an in-content image. So if I move this, you can see it's pushing the content out of the way. So this has what's called a text wrap applied to it. And a text wrap is kind of like a force field around something that we want nothing to touch. So for example, I'll just draw a circle here. I'll go to my ellipse tool. I'll hold shift to draw a perfect circle. And I'll just give it a fill so we can see it. So if I want the type to be away from that, right now the type is behind it. I can go up to these symbols here, but I'm actually going to open up my text wrap panel. I have it selected. Here's my text wrap panel. And I'll just click through these. So the first one is none. The second one is bounding box. So this box that we're seeing, I'm going to zoom on this even more. This box that we're seeing around the shape is the bounding box. So I can do it by that, or I can do it by shape. And we'll see it will conform to the shape itself. And then because it's a circle, it only has one side. I can open up how far away that content is from it. And there's others here. Of course, you can get it to open up across all the text, or there's just various ones, but the shape one is one that I use a lot. So I'll zoom out. So now, of course, this, we wouldn't put type in here like this. It's really messing with a text wrap in, sorry. We wouldn't put an image in here like this because of how it messes with the type. But that was just to show you how it works. So you see wherever I move it, all the type is like, it has to move away from it. So what's happening, and delete this, what's happening here is this one, because it's a square, and here's our type text wrap window again with the settings, it's getting pretty specific in the space that is designated in there with the type. So I've set the top a little more than the sides, but you can see when you unlink that, it's unlinked right now, you have control over each side when it's a multi-sided thing. Okay, so you'll see that the text wrap, it takes some definitely some practice, like everything else. You start to figure out how you can get it exactly the way you want it, but it is pretty cool. Like, it's a great tool to use. Just remember, you don't want to just throw it in the middle, throw something in the middle of type. Like in this case, it's kind of in the middle of the columns. So finally, I cover that as well in the tutorial. I want to show you this error thing. So remember, anytime you see red indicators in design, like right here, we have the red question mark. Then we saw that same red question mark in the links panel because it was basically saying the whole image is missing. And we see red down here in the error. That red is an indicator. So any indications with red. In fact, I'm going to show you one more before we finish because it's an important one. So if I double click on this error, it's going to bring up what's called the pre-flight window. We'll talk more about this later in the term, but this will really show you like what's wrong with my document. So right now we know we have a missing link. I'm going to double click on links. I'll double click on missing, and it's saying this is the one that's missing. I'll double click there, and it kind of moves that right in behind my window. It says this one, like it moves your screen or your view so that you see which one it's talking about. And then if you open up this info panel here, it will give you a little bit of a trick to fix. So in this case, it's a missing file. The fix in the links panel, use the relink button in the flyout menu to find the linked file. So that's great. It's little hints. Those little hints can be helpful when we don't know how to fix something. So I'm going to make another error happen here because this is one that happens a lot, especially when we're new at using this. So I'm just going to make this happen. I'm going to close up this type frame a little. And we see that little red box there, that right there. That's meaning overset type. So that threw my second error. So if I go in, text, now this is the one you see the most. It's okay if you have errors while you work. You know you're going to get to them. You'll get them fixed up. But you want to make sure that you have an error-free document like this one, no errors, when you're done. So I'll double click on text. It says there's overset text, meaning that there's more in that type frame than we're allowed to see. So I'll hit that again. I'll hit text frame. It brings me to it. And then I open up my info and it says the problem is 214 characters are hidden, essentially. They're overset. Resize the text frame or edit the text so that it all fits. So I'll go, okay, I'll resize the text frame. There we go. The link, the error went away. That's a really common one. So just anytime you see red in these, and the joke is when you're learning in design, you see a lot of red, but don't worry, you won't get angry. But in those, you want to just be calm. You can take care of it. Eventually, you're working through it. But when you go to production, you want to make sure it's error-free. But when you see those, you want to learn what that's all about. Okay, so that's kind of the intro to InDesign, but the tutorial really walks you through a lot of these details. I talk about spanning columns, creating columns, some great text stuff. And quite honestly, if you can really get these habits down, the ones that I showed you today, the ones I showed you in the tutorial, you'll really be quite good at InDesign very quickly. You will. It's just one of those programs that is extremely intimidating, yet quite easy to use. That's one of the things about InDesign. It looks like just looking at it, you're like, wow, that's a lot. It looks like someone just put you in the cockpit of a jet and said, okay, fly this thing. But you're only using one tool at a time. And once you understand how detailed you can be, and if you want something in a specific spot or a specific way, you can do it. So that's a great thing. And remember, what you've learned in Illustrator and what you've learned even some in Photoshop, you can carry over to this. For example, everywhere. We have a box here. Well, this is a vector program like Illustrator. So I can go to the direct select cursor here, and I can click on just that anchor point and move it. I can change the shape of that box because it's vector artwork. So I can work with this in many of the same ways I can with Illustrator. Another great thing is I can literally copy out of Illustrator and directly paste into InDesign. And actually, I'm going to see if I have something open. No, I don't. But I'm going to make something here. Sorry, this is something I'm working on, but I'm just going to make the kind of a fake. Let's just pretend this is a logo. So I'm going to copy this out of Illustrator, copy, and actually I'm going to do some type too, because I want to show you what it's going to do that might throw you off. So this is my Lorem Ipsum logo, and I'll convert it to outlines. You guys remember that? Create outlines. Okay, this is my logo. I'll group it, copy it. I'll delete it so I don't leave it there. I'll go over to InDesign and paste. Copy and paste. Now the thing is, when we do that, this is what it's going to look like, and this throws a lot of people off. Oops. So you see those outlines, and people think, why is that color there? Why are those outlines there? pasting directly from Illustrator into InDesign, what it's doing is it's just outlining all of those shapes. That's it. It's outlining them, with the outline, the working mode outline. So when I press W and go into presentation mode, well, I have to put it on the document. Let me get this where we can see it. So the outlines are there, and then when I press W, they go away. It's just the frames that it puts around those shapes. That's all. So I had a student just last week. They were trying so hard because they were working properly. They're in working mode. They're trying so hard to fix the color around the edges, and they're getting upset. And they asked for help, and I just said to it, that's just, and it's totally understandable. It's just the outline that's happening around those shapes, because those were shapes when we converted that text to outlines. Okay, so you can really work smoothly between Illustrator and InDesign. You just need to be aware of a couple of those little things that you might see when you do that. All right, so that's our kind of intro to InDesign. I cover all of that in the tutorial. The tutorial is super valuable. It's really going to help you become acquainted with it. It's, you know, I would say take your time at it. Just you have a week, maybe you can fit in some doing it once in a while, so you're not just doing it all at once, but it's not too long. If you do it all at once, it should be fine. But my biggest recommendation with learning InDesign is, first of all, don't be intimidated. It only looks intimidating, and I've shown you, and you show you in the tutorial, ways that you can use it, you know, more fluidly, and you're in control. The other thing is, when you find you're getting frustrated with it, that's the time to step away. Just go, okay, I'm going to take 15 minutes and go for a walk or get a snack, or I'm going to take 12 hours, whatever you need to take a break from it. Because once you reach that point of frustration in learning something that is quite detailed and technical, you won't be learning anymore. You'll just be frustrated. So don't hesitate to step away for a little bit, and you will get it. Now, I also ask, please note any questions that come up while you're working through it. If there's something that isn't necessarily in the tutorial that you're thinking, like, I've always wondered, you know, when I work with these programs, how do I do this? Or this made me wonder how to do that. Or can you give a little more detail on this part? The best thing that you can do is come to class with questions about this kind of work, because you're going to be laying out an ad. So when you're laying out the ad, of course, you know, you're going to be you're designing your ad, and that's going to have all kinds of questions. So this project 2, the ad, is really when we bring together InDesign and Photoshop, right? We're pulling those two together. You're doing your composite in Photoshop. You're bringing that composite, your product composite, you're bringing that into InDesign. You're placing it in, remember, file place, and that's what you're building your ad around. So this is a lot, and never hesitate, honestly, never hesitate to ask any questions. I can show you in any of the programs when we're on how to do something, and if for some reason it's something I don't know how to do, which I don't know how to do everything, I'll find out and I'll post a tutorial. Okay, so are there any questions before we sign off? Does anyone have any questions on any of that? It's a lot. InDesign is a lot, but it's honestly, guys, in our kind of work, it's one of the best programs you can know. You can offer so much value when you know these programs, especially when you can work with the 3. But InDesign is one that, in communications, it's invaluable. It's it's in such demand right now, people that can use it. I'll give you one hint to how valuable it is a lot of what we're doing in communications now is doing accessible content development. And some of you may have heard of that, but accessible content means it's fully inclusive. It's designed and it functions, and more so functions, so that people with various disabilities, vision, hearing, mobility, they can interact with and engage with our content. So when we work with something like InDesign, the better you get at it, you are making accessible content. And a lot of what we do by default and how I try to teach it is accessible. But in the communications industry, very few still know how to work with InDesign, work with these programs with regard to accessibility. So it's a pretty big value right now. That project where you saw a piece of a project there I was working on, and it's a really big project. I have to create it's, I guess, about 500 pages is going to be when it's done, a manual. It has to be fully accessible. That means that when I export the PDF, everything that I did in InDesign has to work on screen readers, has to work on certain devices that are used for disabilities, and it has to be all ordered, tagged, like all these things that sound complicated but really aren't that complicated. And there's just so few people that know how to do it still properly. So that's my encouragement to you. I know InDesign doesn't look fun, it doesn't sound fun, but if you want to lend value to your skill set in this industry, it's one of the best pieces of software you can learn, 100%. Okay, so that's why whenever you have questions, I will absolutely help you with it. We'll figure it out, and even if I have to do another tutorial, I'm happy to do that, because it's definitely worth it for you. Okay, guys. Well, you're off next week, so I won't see you next week. You have a break, so you have work to do, but please also take a break. Get some relaxation in. Let me know if any questions come up. I'll be checking my email throughout the week. And otherwise, I will see you 2 weeks from today. Okay? Have a great weekend and a great break. You deserve it. Talk to you later, guys.